What's up YouTube, 420 Gucci Gang here. First quarter of this video is going to be pretty much a waste of time while I self-promote, and that's about as far as I can carry this on.
XXX 420 XXX.
Alright, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yay, Linux is magical. Sorry I'm late, I was walking the dog.
Two demerits.
Oh man. I hope you have your shitting pants on,
Oh, I always have my shitting pants on.
'cause you are about to shit your pants.
Worst Negan ever.
Who said I was being Negan? Just giving you a warning.
He says
Yay.
it's a wear back.
Yay, ominous warnings, foreboding, excitement.
I consider myself foreboding.
Forebode shadowing.
5 minutes in, everyone dies.
No, forebode. Come on.
Okay, any questions before we get started?
No.
Okay. We returned to London in early October of 1454. The scene opens to a view of an opulent lobby in the Westminster Palace with the fine red carpets and well-lit torches. The royal guards patrol slowly by in their suits of plate as we pan downwards. The camera moves through the floor and into the darkness. Moments later, we continue to pan down and re-emerge, coming out of the dark ceiling of St. Mary's Undercroft, following one of these long columns down as voices echo below. Finally, the pan stops on the Gauntlet, assembled, and in the distance behind them Prince Ambrose and Genevieve, departing through the nave and past the pews. The Lincoln Prince John Mark has narrowly escaped with his ghoul Sir Reynald from a tense and briefly violent court. His words ring in your heads, a warning, a threat of destruction to any Cainite who trespasses in the fief of Lincolnshire without his invitation. Save for one, Robert de Vere. The court has emptied, mostly in desperate chase of Jean-Marc. Ragna has since departed to alert the Covenant Council, and with Ambrose and Genevieve gone, the four of you are left in the wake of this calamity. The scene is yours.
That was unexpected.
Not wholly. It could have definitely gone better.
And it could have gone significantly worse as well.
We have narrowly avoided tragedy.
Or have we just delayed it?
Certainly remains to be seen. Though I think a full council meeting may happen now.
There's no doubt of that.
And they're going to decide what to do with us.
Worried?
Well, this entire event could be pinned on us, so there is some right to such notion.
No, we were acting within our edict. The court of public opinion will damn us far more than Okay.
So what do we do now?
We regroup. We prepare. We will surely be called to testify before the assembled covenant. Most of them, anyway.
Perhaps there's some other evidence we could discover.
Yes, but the question in that front is where?
Quite so.
I don't suppose we have any other leads to check out.
Alfonso seems a fruitful lead to chase, but
But I believe someone's already being put after that already.
precisely. I would dearly like to question the man.
Then perhaps the evidence itself. Perhaps some investigation on the actual numbers that were on that paper.
They are extreme, but not unreasonable given the size of the organization in question.
But if it's not being accessed, where could it be?
That would be a question for Jean-Marc.
And if I remember correctly, you're the only one that's allowed to go in there without being put to death.
Quite right.
I believe that is a conversation best had behind closed doors. We're a bit too public here.
Then let's return to the manor.
My thoughts exactly.
And if there are no objections, Cormac's going to start heading back towards manor.
The Undercroft is basically empty except for us as far as we can tell, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Then yeah. Tom will also.
All right. Group of you files out, and leaving the Undercroft and eventually leaving the palace, you make your way back to Tom's manor, where you find yourselves back in his study once more to deliberate.
It seems clear that at some point Robert will need to go to visit Jean-Marc.
You have to deliver news of the meeting, if nothing else.
That would be the question. Do you wait until the Covenant has convened and given its ruling? Or do you reach out and try to present some kind of assurances that we have his best interests in mind, in spite of appearances?
He won't believe that.
I didn't say it was the best of plans.
Judging from the way he looked at you, I'd imagine it's quite the grudge now.
That's what I'm afraid of. I fear for the safety of my sire. Hugh de Beauchamp is a formidable Cainite, but Jean-Marc is a prince with many resources.
Do you think simply because of the ruling you would target your sire?
You have met your grandsire, haven't you? He seems to me rather impulsive and petty. I wouldn't be surprised if he made an example of you. In my name.
You have to understand, Ambrose would have reacted poorly to the information we brought, regardless of how it was presented. Perhaps if it had been handed out in slow measure, leading with the will, maybe. It's unimportant.
You didn't see the look on his face. He would have demanded everything. He did demand everything, on penalty of death.
Rather my point. Jean-Marc might have responded less poorly if it had come to light in a less damning way, but that is Ambrose's fault, not ours.
Did Ragna's actions seem unpredictable?
No, she seems like she was trying to keep control of the situation, though it didn't quite work out.
She stood away from the conflict and avoided intercession at all. What we need to be sure of with Jean-Marc is that he doesn't instigate further conflict with other Covenant princes, especially Ragnar.
And if he reaches out to Barbaros, if he gives the ruling that it means that he can go after Ragna, then he could very well get an ally from that.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's another question we need to answer first.
Such as?
The Covenant is failing. Do we act as seamstresses and attempt to sew up the tattered remains of this tapestry, hoping that it endures another decade, at best? under strained conditions. Or do we not do that?
I'm not sure what good you could see from the Covenant being broken apart.
My sire, Genevieve, when I met with her, said something that has rung more true of late. It was all bound to fail eventually.
So what? Ride the wave of conflict from an inevitable fall?
I would say mitigate the damages.
To whom?
Well, the good book does say the meek shall inherit the earth. I would say our duty at this point is to ensure the young are not used as cannon fodder.
And to end this, well, more quickly than it would otherwise be ended.
That would be where you come in, yes.
That is what I did during the Welsh Rebellion, and it is what I will do here. The countryside was still ravaged, but it didn't end nearly as badly as it was initially thought to. More importantly, if all of this is going into chaos, and we need to pick a side that isn't just the Covenant, we need to choose which of those sides to back and choose that fast before people start to pull at our string.
Have you not been paying attention? The tugging had already begun.
I'm aware, but they're going to be doing it much more frequently now.
My concern at the moment is the more young that are cast into the melee, the more are going to become disenfranchised and seek an alternative.
What options are there even?
Something idealistic and new, led by a foreboding character with a great axe and a slip of a woman.
I don't think they would spare the life of the young. If anything, many more would fall.
Not at all what I'm saying. If the young begin fleeing the cities because they fear being used as pawns in a war between princes, where will they go?
Whichever seems to be the safest.
And a cadre of rebels, speaking truth power as they see it, burning down everything that holds value to those in a position of power, seems like a rather romantic notion.
Romantic, yes, but not the safest.
You've obviously never been truly angry.
No, and I doubt the neonates are getting that angry.
You haven't talked to them.
And when have you last spoken?
I have it on good authority that the young, in London at least, are on edge. They distrust the Covenant. They distrust us as their lackeys. Most of them fear for their own lives.
Isn't that the status quo for neonates? I know when I was their age, I felt the same. I think we're suffering under a logical fallacy here. A false dichotomy, if you will. That either Covenant will survive or it will not. There are many shades of grey in between.
What do you see as the alternatives? Tom is being deeply sincere. He only sees two ways.
You seem to think that if one prince wants to go to war, they all will. That's not necessarily the case. In some cases, cooler heads will prevail. Kincaid, for example. He doesn't seem the kind who has time for petty squabbles. And what about Octavia? We don't know much about her. All we know for certain is that Ambrose and de Martinique are at each other's throats. Everyone else is an unknown. We can't make false assumptions.
That's fair. But then, that presupposes that the Covenant will endure.
Maybe I'm a bit of an optimist. But I don't think it's going to crumble around us just because of this.
No.
Jean-Marc is one prince. He can be replaced. No offense, Robert.
When you put it that way, perhaps this whole squabble between princes would be ignored or allowed to continue with just those two.
Perhaps Jean-Marc is replaced, but in order to achieve that, the Covenant will have to ride in and remove him first.
It wouldn't be the first time in history that praxis was taken away from an unwitting prince.
That's true. But what forces would be used to extract?
We've seen firsthand the size of de Martinique's forces. Even he would not be able to withstand an extended onslaught from the rest of the Covenant, if they chose to remove him.
If he indeed has the kind of wealth that is being claimed, I have no doubt he could assemble a mercenary force the likes of which the other princes have never seen.
What, a mercenary force, perhaps, built from the populations of other cities nearby, which might not be under his domain, and therefore could not be completely trusted. Money will only get you so far if you don't have allies. Ask the Irish. We've been dealing with it for centuries.
He's right. It's the same in business. It's why I wouldn't accept the mercer's offer. Still, though, do we support the Covenant in this? Or do we merely play our parts and go back to our investigation?
That is the question we should have been asking from the beginning.
Will not the investigation support the Covenant?
It may not. But it gives us plausible reason to avoid directly influencing the outcome of whatever course of action they choose, barring direct command.
Well, I know what I intend to do. And I am not particularly good with diffusing situations like this.
Apparently, several of us need practice on that. Myself included.
For myself, there is something that I'd like to study, something we agreed to look into in exchange for, well, the vision related to the axe.
Of course.
We might also decide to lie low for a while, see how it plays out.
Precisely, and what better way to lie low than locking yourself up in some massive library and waiting until things come to fruition?
At Cambridge. And
Precisely.
He grins at her. Well, then my vote is that we put the investigation on hold. At least until we see what becomes of Lincoln.
More importantly, we don't know where else to check besides going to the source itself, and that is incredibly risky. But I do vote that we try to muster what forces we can in the meantime. Should things turn south.
I'll see what my source can do to gather influence among the young. At the very least, I'd like to have a finger on that pulse, so to speak. Let me be clear, Robert. When, not if, but when you go to meet with Jean-Marc, mention nothing of Ragna. Not a breath. Not a single syllable of her name. Don't mention York. Don't mention Duke Richard.
Well, I certainly can't say I'll avoid mentioning that willingly.
I don't think we've come any closer to deciding what we're actually going to do.
For the moment, it sounds as though we're going to wait out the storm and see which direction the wind is blowing after.
But Enelid is talking about mustering forces. Wouldn't that be willfully engaging?
No, it's more of a precaution, and I believe Thomas was already doing so.
It's how we choose to direct those forces that will matter in the end.
Well, I'm sure we can all think of something to do while we lie low.
I believe you're the only one that hasn't specified what they wish to do.
Well, if I have to be specific, I do want to get some more information on the Mercers. How long is Ragna staying in London?
She didn't say, though I scarcely expect her to leave before the Covenant is convened.
Perhaps I may stay here for a while. And I'm certain this is a active area for the Mercers.
Quite so. One of the most active ports in Europe.
Just need to have some time to work with officials, perhaps, even noble families. Someone must have a deeper insight on their inner workings.
I think it's time to make good on that boast about placing a trade port in Yorkshire. That might get you the information you're looking for, by hook or by crook.
Indeed, that may be a start.
Do you know if there are any foreign companies here that would have any information on them?
That sounds like a question that Tom should be able to answer.
If a foreign enterprise would know about the Mercers.
Or have any information on them?
You have to assume on some level that other traders, particularly the Venetians, since their trade seems to stretch this far north, they have to have had contact with them.
There should be some traders from Venice at port. I'll see if I can't help you identify.
Alright, very well. This is... Should you find anything that requires anyone knowing Middle Saxon, I can help on that front, as far as being a translator is concerned.
Alright, is there anything else anyone brings up in this meeting?
Not right now.
No.
Okay. The meeting concludes, the night eventually slipping into day. As you begin to enact on some of these plans. We're going to begin some downtime here as each of you sets off to work on different projects. Over the next, let's say over the next week, you learn through Ambrose that the Covenant has been called at Old Sarum, the neutral Covenant meeting location, and it is to be held on the night of Candlemas, which is February 2nd of the new year, which is almost 4 months from now, which at first strikes you as somewhat a great deal of time to wait. But when considering that these elders rarely meet more than once a decade to avoid the disruption of their machinations, twice in 1 year is actually unheard of. And this time is needed to receive message from abroad, arrange affairs, and return to Salisbury for this meeting. And so you know you have a bit more than 3 months time. We will start with Elenid. What do you get up to? Well, starting in mid-October 1454.
She intends to go to Cambridge and study that scroll to see what else they can decide.
Okay. And Cormac, are you going with her?
I am, but there are some other things I wanted to do when it's my turn.
Okay. Anything else you mean to do? I suppose some of it's going to depend on how long it takes you to work on this and how long you spend on it. But is there anything else on the horizon for Elenid?
See if she can muster what forces she can. Or at least see anyone looking for that type of work.
Okay, but researching the scrolls from your Cappadocian contact takes precedence?
Takes precedence. If it's the choice between those two, she will go with research.
Okay. Then we will go to Cormac and clarify what his intentions are for the next several months.
Alright, step A, buy a horse with Tom's help.
Okay. That's
And he's
easily
looking.
enough done. If Tom allows for the coin to flow, it's a
Yep.
simple purchase.
Yeah, and he's making it a good one this time, because Tom owes him.
Facts.
He's getting himself a destrier.
Nice. They are very costly, but they're well suited to war. You find a fast and very strong white destrier. It does cost a pretty penny, but Tom is flush enough for it. As long as he doesn't buy too many of these.
Just the one, his normal gringolet.
Alright. With Tom's help, you now have a white destrier named Gringolet.
Cool.
Mark that down. I should too.
I'll just put it in the bio down here.
Okay. Now that you have your new steed, what else do you mean to do?
Something that we had talked about previously. I guess it doesn't matter if it's public knowledge. He does want to try to learn animalism. He thinks that Helen is a good place to go for this, because she's feeling scorned for Bella cutting her out of the loop. Perhaps Cormac can offer her more information down the line as payment.
Since you were with Elenid in Bristol and she gave you the rundown of Bristol, you do know there is a gangrel there by legend named Amber. And she is well known for doing these kinds of trades of service for scouting or combat or training. And she would certainly know as well. This at least crosses your mind.
And he will consult Elenid on perhaps a stop by in Bristol for a short while. Even though they just left there.
Yeah, isn't that out of the way for the college?
You look at the map. It's obviously not on the way, but
My question is more, are we traveling in the opposite direction or something?
He'll also offer the possibility that he will continue to Bristol and then meet her in Cambridge later.
give me one moment. So yes, Cambridge is north of London, and you would be going west, so it would be out of the way. But if you go and then get the initial training on this and then join her in Cambridge, you could do that. All in all, let's see here. It would probably set you back about a month's time, including travel and training.
It's a worthy sidetrack. Of all the powers the vampires have, this one intrigues him the most.
Okay. You travel back to Bristol, and through word of mouth, through speaking to some of the contacts you met previously, you do get in touch with Amber. Let me change a couple things here. That's better. Okay. So you actually meet, at first, what you think is a wolf of this golden reddish fur that is accompanied by other wolves, and when she shifts in front of you, you think perhaps you're finding another lupine, and it at first is intimidating, but when you see that she is not trying to tear you apart and seems to have some composure, she appears to you as this very comely and tall, almost Amazonian-looking woman, entirely bereft of clothing, mind you. She has long golden hair in human form, and her skin is a pale pink, and you see old scars across her chest and her back, and she does have some whiskers that seem to be appearing at her face. And upon offering this trade, she requests a boon in exchange for training you. A major boon.
Oh, wow. Does she seem like a politically minded type, or is it something that Cormac would like to do?
She strikes you as very mercenary.
Oh, he's all for that. He will give her the boon.
She agrees to teach you, although it does require imbibing a single point of vitae from her.
One step toward Bloodbound, baby. He'll do it, though.
Alright. Over about a week, she spends all night with you, teaching you how to speak to animals, to make use of your beast in a way you've never tried to before. Manipulating it and calming it to the point where you can feel a similar connection to the animals around you, to nature itself, really. It's a strange experience, And by the end of the week, you still feel very uncomfortable with it. But you do feel that you have just enough mastery that you can begin to experiment on your own and practice the ground steps that she's taught you. And she also seems to be confident that you will be able to grow from this over time. So in mechanical terms, you can buy it as an out-of-clan discipline now.
And I will do so. I assume I have enough. Hang on one second. I should have looked this up beforehand. Okay, so out of clan. Oh yeah, it's 10. Okay, yes. I will.
All right, you may buy it. Once your training is done, she disappears into the night with her group of wolves. Back to wherever it is she keeps. And you make your way over in the direction of Cambridge, where Elenid has been already working towards uncovering this research. Let me just get up my notes for this person. Alright, so Elenid, you can begin this research on your own, and I'm going to have you make a roll for each month, so there'll be 3 rolls. The first one you'll be doing alone, because you will not have the aid of Cormac with you. I'll have you make an intelligence academics roll. The difficulty here is going to be 5. Your target success is going to be 15. And this is going to just basically see if over this course of time do you, and then plus Cormac, do you uncover what you need to from research. Alright, and what is your specialty is in tactics, correct? That's your
My
accent?
specialty is in tactics, and as such, it does not apply.
So 4 successes the first month. You find
And that's added on to the 6 we already have.
So this is I'm basically saying you have 15 more to go from there.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry for the misunderstanding. So you have 11 to go. You find this first month that the resources of Cambridge are much more useful. It takes you time at first to get used to where to go, which building to draw resources from. But you quickly find a good method, and you find through conversation and some experimentation where to go to study and which tomes to draw from and when to draw them, because it seems that being too engaged in this can draw attention, and then too many questions could become problematic. Some of these resources are used by some of the scholars already there. But by the end of the first month, you're making much more rapid progress. You're beginning to realize through a pattern of this research, it seems like Dionysus was doing many of these kind of subject dives in an attempt to understand someone, maybe someone he was looking for. And as you were before, you're starting to narrow down who this might be and where they might be. And it's at the end of this month, at around mid-November, that you find Cormac has joined you. And he as well may aid you in your future research. So for this next month, I'll take the same roll from both of you. Intelligence Academics difficulty 5. So that's 5 successes together. So you're now at 9. Cormac makes up for some of the missteps that you find, Elenid. You spend a lot of time going down this theory of where this ammonite creature might be found or where signs of it might be found, and it ends up being wasted time, while Cormac fortunately helps redirect the research. And because he's very proficient in making use of the resources here, he saves some of the time here in undoing some of the theories that you were working off of. And so, Cormac, you also become aware that Dionysus is hunting someone or tracking down an individual who may have been going to some kind of grave or some kind of tomb. And really now you're just trying to find out which grave or tomb might have this ammonite as a symbol, as a name, or embedded somehow an association between where this individual might be and how it connects. But you feel like you're getting close. So I'll take another roll from you for the next month or the remaining of November.
Just really quick, for something else going on during this time.
Mm-hmm.
Since Cormac is back home now, he's going to start looking around the campus during their free hours,
Sure.
such as they are, to see if he might find any disillusioned students such as he once was. He thinks it's a time in his life now with so much upheaval that he might want to take a ghoul.
Absolutely. Let me look and see what would be appropriate. Looking for a disillusioned student. I'll have you do a perception, empathy, difficulty 8.
Whew, okay. Yeah, ideally he wants a disillusioned student who is disillusioned because they're just too smart to be here. Or they don't feel challenged enough.
Okay.
But we'll see what the roll says, because that's pretty high difficulty. I'm going to spend a point of willpower on this since we got all of it back anyway.
Okay.
He really wants to succeed at this. Hey!
2 successes. Alright. Give me one moment.
He had considered contacting that scholar he met in Lincoln, Terry Durand. But then he realized it would be too dangerous even with a pseudonym to send a letter into that cursed city. So better to stay closer to home.
Alright. Over your time spent at Cambridge, looking for one of these students who isn't as pleased with how things are going, and you just it takes you some time just looking at the expression of students and seeing who's obviously unhappy. You do eventually come across one student. You're kind of passing through one of the arcs into one of the libraries when you hear an argument, and this student kind of storms out, having some kind of argument with one of the masters, one of the professors of the university. And he's a very young man. You can tell he's short, dark hair. He reminds you much of you. And after tracking him down and learning a bit more about him, You learn his name is Gautier d'Accord. He's of French birth, but a student here who is studying many of the similar subjects you were, but seems to disagree with the theories. He thinks he has better ideas for how some of these might be advanced, and his ideas are being shot down left and right. And so he often gets bad marks from the masters, which you know can be due as much to failure to understand as it is the politics of a professor not liking a student. And you think it's more the latter than the former. He seems very bright, from what you can tell.
And every chance he gets, he's going to try to ply this kid with understanding, empathy for his plight. And that he too was once a student here, and he knows how the politics play out. And what if he could help him?
I'll take a charisma empathy from you. Difficulty 7.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, jeez.
It is a botch.
That's a botch.
And we chase him away.
He gets angry at you. You make a misstep in your phrasing, and he starts to assume that you're either working for or represent one of the masters or someone at the university who's trying to come down on him. And everything else you say after that just kind of gets up to a wall that he's put up.
Until he has him cornered in a dark room and rushes at him with a speed unnatural to men and lifts him up against the wall.
He's terrified at that point. You, unfortunately or unfortunately, caught him when the university obviously was late at night and there weren't many people around, and so you have this young scholar now not angry but terrified for his life.
His face will soften a bit, and he will ask him, "How would you like to have power like this?"
He seems too afraid even to answer.
Then he'll gently set him down, assuring him that he's not going to kill him.
He sits there and trembles and definitely isn't going anywhere. He feels like he's about to be murdered and is at your mercy.
That's the point where I'm going to turn on the presence.
Okay.
A little bit of fear mixed with awe doesn't ever hurt. It is, after all, the Bruja way. Shall I roll for this?
For your awe?
Yes, I mean, are we just gonna... I don't want to hold up the scenes too much.
I won't have you roll for the awe. I'll let you have that.
I have a fairly decent dice pool, a good chance of making it.
And in this moment, I'll give it to you. So he is captured by your gaze, and the adrenaline running through him, of course he wouldn't call it at that time, plus the awe that you make use of, has certainly done much. He's not focusing on anything else but you, and he's listening closely.
So we'll ask him again. After telling him it's better that he hates him, it will help matters if he hates him. But how would he like to have power like this? Power that will show them all his worth.
He agrees readily and excitedly to that.
And then he will gain from him a promise never to speak of what happens here tonight, ever, with anyone. Unless approved by Cormac first.
Just as readily he agrees. Excited but afraid, you can see both in his eyes.
and he will ghoul him.
Okay.
It actually worked better that he made him botch, because he wanted him to be both afraid and desirous of it.
Even after ghouling him, he seems as devoted to you as he is intimidated and kind of marveled, awed by your power.
And he will tell him he'll return to him every few weeks over the next few months to see how his studies are going, but that he should probably make plans to matriculate from Cambridge. There's a whole wide world out there.
He explains that he was close to finishing one of his theses very soon, ahead of schedule, but one of these masters is holding him back and won't let him graduate. If it weren't for this one master, he could probably teach some of this himself.
Cormac will take care of that.
He seems excited to help you and be with you and hear what you have to say, and you have an academic ghoul, certainly.
Excellent. Just one more thing before we continue to studies, and this is the last thing I want to do, is actually go talk to the and make sure it's understood that this student has a benefactor now, and it's in the professor's best interest to allow him to finish his work.
Alright, so you want to intimidate this master into letting him graduate?
Yes.
Alright, charisma, intimidation, difficulty 6. Three successes. You get your point across. Describe how he does that.
Alright, so I assume that he finds this master in his office
Yes.
at night. He introduces himself as a scholar from Bristol who once studied at the academy here, the Academy of Law, who's taken an interest in this student, and has heard, although through no fault of the student's own, he's quite persuasive, he says, that this master seeks to hold him back, and that he's not going to let that happen, and he will loom over his desk, glaring at him with his unblinking vampiric eyes, not going so far as to break the silence, but making the men feel very uneasy. Hoping it doesn't turn to violence.
It works very well in the end. This scholar almost falls out of his seat, afraid, and agrees to stay out of the student's way, and that as long as he can finish his remaining tests, there wouldn't be any problem with him signing his graduation papers. In fact, he'll be the first one to sign it.
Good. That is good. And he'll leave him to clean up his sodden pants.
Stench of urine is strong in this room as you leave. You feel like you've done a good job here.
That remains to be seen, but that was the last thing he wanted to accomplish, besides study.
Okay. Easily enough done in between your research with Elenid. Do you tell Elenid about any of this, or is this a secret project?
He has no reason to keep it from her. They know each other well enough by now.
It doesn't bother Elenid in the slightest. She'll only care if it ends up interfering with their research.
No, he will explain he didn't go so far as to make any threats. His presence was enough to terrify this man into compliance. So hopefully it won't come back to bite them.
Alright. You finish out November, now with a ghoul who is very attentive in his studies and no longer seems to complain to you about his arguments with the professor. He seems to have almost overnight become more agreeable. So I will have you move on into December and make another roll for your research.
Spending a willpower.
Okay. So we're at 9 successes.
It was difficulty 5 on that
Oh
one?
my, that'd be 6 successes on my end.
Yes.
It was
Difficulty
5. Okay. Yeah, I just looked it up. Wow.
All right. 11 successes between the two of you. The month of December is very productive for both of you. You both rapidly make progress. In fact, I'll say it's not even full December. It's halfway through before you both come to the same conclusion. There is an ancient Neolithic tomb that you pinpoint through your research. It's located in Somerset. It's called Bath Tumulus. It's a very old place and a very old tomb. And you've found that there are engravings embedded into the entrance walls. You find a footnote in the scroll that depicts and explains the image of the sea creature. And there's a kind of quote which states, "Artist depiction taken from Bath Tumulus, Somerset, 1285. This, you think, based on the notes and the emphasis given to it in Dionysus' notes, if anywhere, he went here, to Bath Tumulus in Somerset.
As they crack this little case of theirs, Elened, her little cold and very much controlled facade cracks, and she seems legitimately excited by the fact of, well, understanding something that was previously unknown for the most part.
Cormac, too, is quite excited. The thrill of academia is obvious in him, especially when there's a breakthrough of this nature. He's ready to go now, unless...
Oh, Elened is more than willing to go now, too.
Do we have time is the question.
You doubt it. You think if you left for London now, you would be back in time for the new year, and time enough to probably regroup with the Gauntlet, as it will take a couple weeks to get back up north. Potentially you could reach Bath Tumulus and return, but it depends on how long you stay, and it certainly risks not meeting the Gauntlet in time for the meeting. You also don't know what the others have been up to.
Oh boy. Well,
it's a gamble, is basically what it comes down to.
Cormac would recommend then that they look into this later, as much as he wants to go now. He doesn't want to risk missing this meeting.
But we've come so close already. Just walking away now just seems like a waste.
What if we do find him and he decides to keep us? Perhaps even against our will.
What if we go to this meeting and we cannot leave?
You make an excellent point. Damn it. We'll go by this Bath Tumulus, see what we see there. We must not tarry, no matter what we find.
Yes, an initial scouting mission before diving fully into it.
We'll take a perception alertness, difficulty 9 from both of you.
Does detail-oriented apply?
Yes, it does.
Wow, that's an amazing roll for the few dice that I have.
You roll 3 dice, 2 of them are 9s. Why can't I roll like that? Alright. And 1 success.
One success.
Yeah. So, over the course of the last couple months you've been here, you've been left alone. You've been quiet and controlled, with a few exceptions, notably by Cormac, to branch out and find a young scholar. But towards the end of your visit, as you're preparing to leave, you do catch sight of a man who's, you think, maybe been watching you. You're not sure for how long now, but it's not just coincidence. You catch him looking at you, Cormac, as you're passing across one of the courtyards between libraries, and again you catch him while Elenet is there, and you don't think it's coincidence anymore. You think someone's watching you or following you. He's dark-clad. He's a young, dark-clad man in a black doublet and black hose and a dark gray cloak.
Young means nothing if he's not among the living. He will let her know surreptitiously that he thinks they're being followed and kind of nod her in the direction of this fellow that he's been following for some time.
We can either attempt to lose him, or we can approach and have a conversation.
Maybe he's too shy to approach us.
Shy, perhaps, or he's keeping tabs on us for someone else.
Wouldn't that be exciting? Let's go have a palaver.
Alright, you go up to try and confront him?
Confront is such a strong word.
Yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. When the two of you start making purposeful walks in his direction, he turns a corner to leave.
Oh, Ned will glance over at Cormac.
You want to give chase?
Only if it means you will not be seen while doing so.
And there are people in this courtyard.
I'll see how far I can get the natural way. And he will take off after the man, not activating his celerity, just using the natural grace it provides him.
Okay. Dex Athletics. Standard roll. Unfortunately, without your vampiric gifts, by the time you turn the corner, you don't see him. He's either ducked into the library, or if you turn another corner, he's gone. Did you include your celerity dice for agility?
I did. My dex is only 2, naturally.
Okay. Just making sure.
Yeah, so a little frustrated, but not willing to pursue this further, especially since the man knows he's been seen. Cormac will return to Elened, and they'll continue making plans for their departure.
At the very least, you seem to have scared him off for the moment.
More reason to leave with haste while he's distracted.
All right. And I've been assuming that Gertrude's been with you this entire time, Ellen. Is that correct?
Of course.
Okay.
Can you spell my ghoul's name, by the way? He doesn't have a cheat yet, so...
Yes, I can.
Because that sounded very French, and I don't know French.
The only thing I know about French is how to say it is not my fault.
Yeah, I will make a sheet for him. And do you tell him you're leaving? Do you bring him with you?
We'll see how far he is in his studies. He doesn't want to take him away from finishing his thesis. He can't always come back.
He thinks he'll be done right around the time of the new year, but this is still around mid-December, so you'll be in London by then.
He'll come back for him then. Or tell him when he's done that he should make his way for London. And he'll let him know the name of a good inn to stay at. And give him some money to do so.
He agrees. He's ecstatic at the idea that once he graduates, he'll come find you in London, and he'll go to this inn and look for you and wait for you there.
And then his true education will begin. And yes, he's that mysterious about it.
The enigmatic nature of the message leaves him more energetic and thrilled for this exciting adventure.
He really has found someone like him, hasn't he? But that's good. He can leave with a clear conscience now. So long as this man who's been following them doesn't make a scene.
And the two of you make your way back to London. And just in time for Christmas. And at that point we will switch gears and check in with what some of the others have been doing. We will go to Robert de Vere. It is still mid-October 1454 here in London. You know about the date that this meeting is supposed to happen at. You know it's going to happen at the Old Sarum Cathedral. And not distracted. You have a few months to decide what you're going to do. You would also, actually, all of you except maybe Cormac and Elned, who left quite soon. Robert and Thomas, you would know that Ragna left very soon after that meeting, explained that she could not leave York unattended and vulnerable with Jean Marc possibly being a renegade. And so she left much earlier than anticipated and returned to York. So she is gone before October even ends.
Does she take her, we'll say, posse?
She does. Everyone intends to leave with her.
Good to know.
So, Robert, what do you do with your time leading up until this meeting?
Huh. Well, she left really early, huh?
Like a couple nights later.
Okay, so we're listening. Well,
He'll I work on spreading influence in London, mainly with go the route of the nobility. Um, the main goal of this would be to find out who's buying from the Mercers, and if he gets a decent list, he'll also use that to Still thinking on this.
Okay. You want me to come back to you? While you think about it?
Yeah, sure, why not?
Okay. We'll go to Tom. You have several months. What do you intend to do?
Being the most timely thing that I can get into, Kazim was investigating disused castles in the nearby area surrounding Essex. Wonder what he came up with.
Kazim reports back to you after being gone about a week that there are really two options that he sees as viable. Castles in disrepair, not terribly far from London proper, and still in the county that would be Middlesex, but technically doesn't exist anymore because London has become a county of itself. But they're fairly close. One is called Edmonton. It's a village of several hundred people, and it had a Moat and Bailey castle once, but fell into disrepair. The family that once kept it up basically died off, and through mismanagement of estates and funds, no one really took care of it after that. And so you think you could probably buy the land and the castle, and it would be expensive, but could be repaired relatively easily over a couple years. The other option he finds for you is a village called Gore, and this has a very similar story, and you find that the castle is of comparable size and strategic ability. It could be rebuilt as well, and this one would actually be cheaper, significantly cheaper. However, Kazim reports to you that the villagers there, the villagers of Gore, they're certain it's haunted. They will not go near it.
It's not necessarily a bad thing.
He gives you the facts. He doesn't assume that you're going to take stock of that superstition or not.
So, when we're talking about expense, the thing that I'm most concerned about is would I need to utilize Thomas's resources to justify the purchase, or could I get away with it with Judith's?
You would need to utilize Thomas's resources, definitely. Either way.
And the only other question is, can we do it quietly enough that no one asks questions about it?
It's kind of a difficult question to answer. No one really quietly builds a castle.
Well, you can quietly purchase one. Theoretically, I guess, maybe. No, probably.
Again, it's kind of like what we discussed before. It depends on who's interested and really wants to dig into it.
Right.
Maybe no one. Maybe there's really no one who cares. It's just an old castle. It's been there who knows how long.
So it was Gore, and what was the other one?
Edmonton is more expensive, and Gore is cheaper but haunted, allegedly.
So one I could probably put the villagers to work to help rebuild, and the other I would need to bring in outside labor.
Yes. Which could end up offsetting some of the price difference.
Yeah. But they're both comparably sized.
Yes. And comparably defensible. Want me to come back to you and bounce back to Robert?
No, I'm coming to a decision, I promise. I think we'll probably go with Edmonton just because there's ready labor on hand. Was he able to figure out what they're doing as far as agriculture or industry in the area? Or if they're just scraping?
A lot of it is subsistence farming. There are some sheep farms, some wool farms. It's definitely not a wealthy town, a wealthy village, I should say. It's got a chapel. It's a few hundred people.
That'll work. I can make that work.
All right, Edmonton it is.
Put that in motion.
Okay, barring any other major purchases, I won't have you roll for it since this is going to be done over time.
Fair enough. That was going to be my next question. So once that's set in motion, I do want Judith to make a visit again to Elysium to kind of take stock of the word on the street, as it were, through Bella. How is the conflict at court finding out in rumors and gossip?
Alright, so you return to Elysium fashioned as Judith, and through Bella you want to find out how that whole scene was perceived.
Well, and anyone else who will talk, but I figure Bella's going to hear the most gossip, so may as well pump her for information.
Okay. I'll have you roll manipulation, etiquette, standard difficulty. Successes. Alright, let me review my notes. Think about how you would hear. Alright, through Bella, you get a good amount of information, especially on London's impression of what happened, particularly that of the neonates. Many of them were frightened at what they saw, what they witnessed was intimidating, because a surprising number of them commiserate with Jean-Marc. Of course, astounded as to how he could have so much influence and money, but more that it does seem like he was brought there to be executed and it makes them think that that could happen to any of them. That if even a powerful prince like Jean-Marc could be brought down and almost killed just for showing up to Elysium, it shakes their belief that Elysium is even safe. If it's not safe for him, how could it be safe for them? Many of them have shaken their belief that the Covenant is going to protect them, or that Ambrose will protect them. And for successes, I will also say that Thomas's involvement in protecting Cash actually reinforced some of their belief that the Gauntlet might be for the good, that they didn't seem to chase Jean-Marc, but they didn't seem to add to the violence. It was actually a bit inspiring to see that the Gauntlet was trying to protect the neonates, that all of them were involved in trying to keep them back, despite many of them trying to participate in this blood hunt. It definitely added to a positive view of the Gauntlet.
How is Cash? He didn't happen to show up to Elysium the same time, did
That Judith did?
Yeah, probably
Yes.
not.
He spends a lot of time in Elysium. You try and hear how Cash is through Bella, or how Cash is through Cash?
Can I not do both?
You could. I'll have a different role for Cash, though. Roll... not etiquette. I'll have you roll... let's see. Manipulation, empathy. Difficulty 8.
There is a 10 in there.
What's your specialty?
That's a good question. Persuasive. I feel like that worked.
Okay, I'll give you one success. He's very reticent to admit to any wrong that he did in trying to subdue Jean-Marc or battle Sir Reynald. It was at the command of the prince, after all.
Judith would be inclined to agree with him.
Although he does admit to you that he is grateful Thomas was there. That's as far as you're going to get from Cash. Bella has little else to add about Cash. He seems quite reticent to speak about it.
In that case, Judith is then going to speak to the neonates directly.
Okay.
Any that will, of course, speak to her anyway.
About what?
So it sounds like there's trouble a-brewing in old London town. Mostly she's going to look at or inquire about, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. In kind of a roundabout way, I want to see just how raw tensions are amongst the young, how close they are to doing something brash,
Like, how close are they to joining the rebels?
or like, leading another ill-fated peasant revolt.
Okay. You were beginning to build rapport with them, although you didn't make a whole lot of headway. So I'll take a perception empathy from you. Difficulty's gonna be 7. Two successes. Alright, over a course of several nights, talking to some neonates and fledglings, and other nights you speak to new faces or return faces, you get a decent impression that given the right message, given the right charismatic speaker or leader at the right time, many of them could be turned against, or at least away from the Covenant, or at least Ambrose, certainly. The scene in court was very sobering to them.
Can I also throw a roll during this time to see if I can't bolster that rapport that I'm building?
Yes, you may. What I have you roll last time? Manipulation empathy or charisma empathy?
I think it was. I mean, either way, they're both fairly appropriate.
We'll go charisma
Maybe
empathy.
leadership.
Yeah, that's fine too. We'll go charisma leadership. Difficulty's gonna be 6. Five successes. Alright. Your time over this winter spent in Elysium, talking with them, commiserating with them, is very productive. You become a known quantity, noticed by Bella, noticed by the sheriff. You're becoming a name and a face that's recognized in Elysium, and very positively by the neonates. They see you as an open ear, an empathetic mind that's recognizing the plights they have and feels for them. And it goes a long way to building trust in them.
That was an unexpectedly good roll. I wasn't ready for that.
So you flash mob the prince?
No,
Oh, okay.
I don't want to jump the shark. Just
Got you.
I think with that done, it's kind of again another one of those. It's a boon and a curse, because the whole point of Judith as an alternate ego was fairly anonymous and under the radar. Now she's on the radar, but in a not unpositive way.
Yeah, she is not under the radar anymore.
Meanwhile, as Thomas, I do want to try and bolster my retinue some. See if I can't add to them, especially if they're going to be guarding a castle soon.
All right. Are you still going to be employing your Sergeant Brandon Carter?
Yeah, because I can't really fault him for how the dice landed last time, but he did leave a bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. Everybody has a bad day, but definitely going to caution him on not getting ahead of himself this time.
He seems to be willing to try again. And where are you sending him out to recruit?
I think probably in the taverns where travelers might pass through, because that to me seems like where the average mercenary is going to set up shop to look.
Okay, London taverns?
Yep.
Okay. And I will have him roll again. Oh, he's much more successful this time. Let me see. You're having him kind of recruit throughout all of winter?
Yeah. Just we'll set him about that task for the next, you said, basically until we're getting ready to leave for South.
Mm-hmm. So over this time, he finds you 12 more recruits. Not knights per se, but men like you have. Most of them trained, all of them healthy, sturdy men, relatively young, and certainly willing to look for coin, looking for work as a mercenary.
This is a regular paycheck, so kind of a novel concept. Can I also throw a roll at that?
Sure. Charisma leadership, difficulty 7. Alright, you also gain 12 men during this time, so combined 24 men have joined your ranks. You've almost doubled in size. You've actually more than doubled in size.
It's a hell of a start. At the very worst, I'll have the same standing retinue when and if these guys are recalled.
Mind you, your first 20 were actual riders. These now 25 men are just footmen.
That's fair, but they can be trained.
They can. Alright, now on the Chamberlain retinue and paycheck, you have 45 men. Is there anything else Thomas means to try and do during this time? He can be pretty busy during most this winter now.
I think not until after the first of the year.
Okay.
But that's the bank.
Right. Alright, so we'll bounce back to Robert as to what are you working on now?
Well, what kind of time frame would I have if I wanted to stay in London for a few months, head to York, and then make it back for this, or make it to Old Serum for this meeting?
Head up to York for a couple months and then head south directly to Sarum to meet with everyone else.
Uh-huh.
Let's take a look. You'd have a good chunk of time. Fortunately, you are the only person who can pass straight through Lincolnshire up to York, so your path isn't as bad as others. So you'd be crossing up 200 miles, and if you're just riding on your own, then you could go faster than, say, with a carriage and a retinue and everything. Or you could also you could boat up. That would be fairly simple. And that would take even less time. I assume Robert's going to save time and take a ship up.
That'd be most prudent. Well, he wants to build influence with the nobility in London first. Maybe depending on how long, a month or two, depending on how long this trip would take.
Matter of waiting for a ferry that you can take up to London, and the trip itself about a week at the very most. You could be arriving in Hull, and then you'd be in York in a couple nights.
Okay. And Lincolnshire would put me close to actual Lincoln.
If you rode north, you would go up through Lincolnshire, and it would take longer, but you could also stop at Lincoln if you wanted to.
Yeah, that sounds maybe preferable to get multiple things done. Okay, so yeah, he'll start with the nobility in London. Yeah, he'll try to find basic information of who's buying from the mercers. If they're charging consistent prices for the families, or if certain families are getting deals. And especially if any families have grudges against them.
Alright, I will have you do a manipulation etiquette roll, standard difficulty. Success. Do you have any specialties there?
Courtly manners for etiquette.
That will definitely apply. So that's 3 successes. And just to clarify, so you're trying to gain influence with nobles so that specifically you can find out who are the buyers from the mercer's wares?
Yeah.
Okay.
Things of that nature, yeah.
So, here in London, you schmooze a bit and blend in very well, speaking with some of the nobility at the court at the Westminster Palace, and no one even questions where you came from or who you're with. You're smooth enough to deflect these things and not mention it at all. And you learn through conversation that the Mercers have a number of accounts, number of families buying from them. Of note, the most popular and the names that keep coming up are the Nevilles and the Percys. They, above all other families, are buying and or at least doing business with mercers in significantly greater volumes than anyone else.
That'll go into. Robert will also keep an ear for politics. How does London feel about? I believe it's Richard of York who is imprisoned there.
I believe it's Edmund Beaufort.
Oh, it's Edmund. Okay.
Yeah. And since you had 3 successes, I'll also tell you that you learn. So the Percys and the Nevilles, these two large families that have mostly been feuding in the north, they're the largest buyers. They're also getting rates that some of the other nobles are complaining about. The Nevilles and the Percys get much better deals, better contracts on what they're buying from the Mercers, especially in terms of things like war supplies. It's cheaper for them.
So quite a few families are quite bitter about this.
Yes, they don't know why the Percys and the Nevilles, they don't know how they got these deals with the Mercers.
Okay.
And your second question was, how does London feel about its imprisoned noble Edmund Beaufort?
Yes.
I'll have you make a perception etiquette roll. Difficulty 5. You've ingratiated yourself fairly well into the courts, very seamlessly. So you getting information here is easier than the average bear. 4 successes. You learn that there is a collection of nobility, kind of a cohort or a small council that surrounds the king, King Henry, led by Margaret of Anjou, and they commiserate with Edmund Beaufort. They see him as an ally that's been imprisoned only because the Lord Protector, the Duke of York, sees him as an enemy. And they are eagerly looking for ways that they can legally get him out, but continue to come up with this lack of answers. There's no way, as long as the Duke of York is Lord Protector of the realm, as long as the king is too ill and too feeble-minded to rule, he'll be imprisoned. And they can't do anything about it, and they're upset about it. Outside of this collective, many are glad that Edmund Beaufort is imprisoned. They view him with skepticism. They view this group with Margaret of Anjou as this corrupt group of nobility which creates problems like the peasants' revolt. They're the reason that these revolts happen, the corruption. And so many nobles outside of Margaret of Anjou are glad that Edmund Beaufort is imprisoned.
Okay. Okay. And was it Richard of York who? Oh yeah, Richard of York would be who Ragna was getting troops for. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Who seems to be in the majority thus far?
As far as like how many nobles are aligned with which side?
Yes, how many families are aligned with which side?
It's tough to say. There are many on each side, but it does seem like there are more people behind and backing the Duke of York right now. But you're very savvy about court politics. That can change depending on who seems stronger. Right now, the Duke of York is very popular and very strong. He has a lot of resources and contacts, and he's well liked by many, even of the common folk.
Okay. So we've got Ranju's group, the ones that have a grudge against the Mercers.
No, that's just kind of generally speaking. Many people are unhappy. This is kind of a gripe.
Okay. Is there a certain family that's of ill repute, kind of has a shady background that is upset at this?
Depending on who you ask, the Percys or the Nevilles could be viewed that way. You ask a Percy what they think of the Nevilles, they'll be the same as the Nevilles think of the Percys. They hate each other, and you definitely know by this point the Nevilles back the Duke of York. The Percys back the King and the Margaret of Anjou's group.
Okay. So it does seem like, from this, the Mercers are attempting to destabilize the realm. Alright, so, Well, depending on how much time, Robert has there, perhaps he'll start seeing if he can, hearing all the arguments, start drumming up support for Edmund.
Build support for Edmund Beaufort.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Let me see here. I'll have you make a manipulation politics roll, standard difficulty. For anyone else, this would be much harder, but you are well practiced in court. You've become kind of a face that some people trust, people definitely listen to.
I'll spend a willpower on this.
Okay. Alright. So 2 successes. You get a couple of nobles to listen to you. You present some arguments about the fleeting strength of the Duke of York. He can't stay Lord Protector forever, you mention to them, and some of them start to see that when the king does regain his senses, things might go the other way. And you get a few of these nobles to certainly start to nod their heads in agreement. No one's saying anything out loud, of course. No one ever says anything overt in these discussions. But you get a good feeling from these people after you speak with them.
All right. How much longer would you say Robert has in London?
I would say all you're really doing is kind of talking and meeting and certainly conspiring. You've done quite a bit of it. I would say all of this has probably taken up about a month's time.
Okay. And the ride to from Lincoln to York would take how long?
Let's see. The ride from London to York, it's 200 miles. And let me look at my notes on travel. Probably go about 20 to 25 miles a day. I'd take you about 9 days of travel, of riding, maybe a little bit less. But actually, you have more coin than most people, and so if you wanted to take a ship from London to Boston and ride from Boston to Lincoln, you could probably cut that in half, actually.
Okay, may do that. That might give him some more time in London to start working the Mercer angle. Of which he'll, he'll see, how far he can go with the local authorities there. Obviously, they're being bribed by the Mercers. He needs to figure out who is.
Alright, I'm sorry. Who's in which port? London or in Boston?
In London.
So you want to find out who the Mercers are bribing?
Yes.
How do you want to go about finding that?
Well, perhaps the constable of the port would be a good start.
Sure.
Yeah, he'll try to get close to him. Yeah,
you could talk to traders, you could talk to dock workers unloading stuff, maybe what they've heard, guards. You could talk to a lot of different people.
He'll avoid the dock workers from previous encounters.
Okay. So you stick with the constable of the...
Yeah, he'll go with the higher ups, men in authority.
Alright, you do realize that asking men in authority who they have been taking bribes from could be informative, but also very dangerous.
Sure.
Okay. We'll take a... Let's see... Manipulation... Everything I would look at, you already have, like, a bunch of dots in. Manipulation... Subterfuge. You gotta phrase this just right. Veiled messages. Maybe intimating that you would bribe them with the right amount too, just to find out.
Alright. Standard?
Difficulty is gonna be 7.
Okay. And since this is a speaking related thing, does his merit come in play at all?
Persuade, charm, or command. I'll give it to you.
Alright.
Four successes. Alright. You do very well. At first, you start talking about this and you bring it up, and the constable is... He's offended, and he puts up this big front of being insulted, and then when he notices no one else is around, he starts asking if you have anything for him, if there's anything you need done for a little extra.
Good.
You get to talking about similar arrangements that have been made in the past, and through talking to him, you find out no one's really being bribed anymore, and he's actually kind of irritated. It's all in the past tense. There were bribes. There were underhanded deals being made, but it was a while back, many years back now. The Mercers did a lot of this when they were trying to get more contracts going, more negotiations quickly expanding, but they don't do it as much now. Now they have the contracts. They don't have to do it anymore. And he's upset because it means he doesn't have as much coin coming in anymore.
How much oversight would this man have over the Mercers at his port?
There's a few men in comparable position to him. The Port of London is very large and expands a great size of the Thames now. So where once one of him would have been sufficient, now 6 of similar position. He's the kind of person who could hold up and make trade difficult. In fact, you think you've maybe heard reports that traders have had issues with men like him in the past, that people like him can cause problems for traders if they're not on good terms or they're not bribed.
Okay. And from what Robert knows, there seems to be a schedule of when the Mercers purge all their records.
I would say you're not sure if there's a schedule. You know it must happen.
Okay. He'll keep this guy as a, he'll presence him and make him a friend, treat him to a good time and keep him as a friend. But he'll look at the ends for any shady characters who would be willing for coin to keep an eye on when the Mercers may do this kind of purging.
The purging of their own records?
Correct.
Alright, unfortunately there's no streetwise, but I'm sure there's something comparable. Let's see. Find somebody shady to do this. Manipulation leadership. Standard difficulty. You've definitely got the resources for this. Oh yeah, absolutely. You find just the kind of cutthroat who at first thinks you're going to offer him some kind of thief job or maybe a stabbing. But when you tell him you really just need him to see when this office unloads a bunch of its scrolls and paperwork, at first he thinks he's not going to know what it is, but if all he needs to know is when they take crates of ledgers and papers out onto the boat and keep track of it, he's glad to take your money for that.
All right.
So make a note that you have made a couple contacts in the dock. Okay. You've still got some time, Robert DeVere.
Okay, so
I'm going to say it's getting to the end of November, getting into December now.
he'll start planning for the trip up to Boston. Make a stop at York. I mean, Lincoln
Okay.
to York. Yeah.
All right. Takes you about 5 days, but it's actually very helpful having one of the harbor constables facilitate faster ferries for you. That comes in handy as a fringe benefit. And you manage to get not just up to Boston, but up to Lincoln in 4 days from London.
Excellent.
So you ride into Lincoln, and actually as you're riding, you are intercepted by knights. Not just men-at-arms, but you recognize the Triple Pegasus. These are knights of Jean-Marc on patrol. And you're escorted in. And once Sir Reynald recognizes you at the castle, he kind of makes sure you get treated a little bit better. And he brings you up to meet with Jean-Marc. And as you're entering Jean-Marc's chamber, I think we're going to pause here and take a break, and we will come back to open up to that scene.
Sly devil.
All right.
All right. And we will be back in 15 minutes.
Thank God, because I have had to pee for like almost
Same.
Oh, so have I. I gotta go right now.
The meeting happens. The only one that shows up is Thomas.
Is that really what you want?
No. That's more of a worst case scenario if something happens to Robert on his visit that's about to happen, or if something happens to us on our little research expedition.
I'm back.
I am front.
Here.
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 So 20 or so sessions ago, I had this notion to expand House Chamberlain out into overland shipping. And now I actually have an opportunity to do that.
Overland shipping? Oh, yeah.
Yeah. The highlighted bit in my player notes.
What's all this, then? Do we have Robert?
I'm here.
Oh, excellent. We shall return. Robert, you are brought to Jean-Marc's chamber, as you have been in the past, although under quite different circumstances this time. Even as you entered the city of Lincoln tonight, there's a tension in the air. You suspect perhaps even the local Hainites here are well aware of what's happened. There are heavy patrols, the walls are manned. This city is on high alert. And so when you walk into the chamber with Jean-Marc, you see that he is armed. He actually has chain on. And he turns to you when you enter. And his expression, at first hard and stony as he's looking out this window, softens a bit. Robert, it is good to see a friendly face after these months. How do you fare?
I fare quite well. Tell me, how have things been for you?
He smirks as he takes a few steps closer into the room toward you. I was already paranoid, and now even more so. I see enemies in my every shadow. It seems my greatest suspicions are finally coming true.
I'd say. From what I've found, it seems like someone's trying to paint you the villain.
It is precisely what I said in court, and yet that bastard pig would not hear any of it.
No, he made quite the spectacle.
It is Chamberlain's doing. He kind of points a couple times in the air. He is the one who arranged for me to be there at that very meeting. I knew from the moment he came here to discuss with me the matters with Cornelius, I could not trust that man. Seems I was right about him as well.
Well, I won't tell you to trust him, but I do not think he had the foresight of planning to put you in danger like that. This is most likely coincidence.
Then, God, blessed be his name, has a terrible sense of humor. I'm afraid I do not see these things as coincidence anymore. And as to what they shall do with me, as you can see, I am prepared.
Do you plan on attending the meeting?
His face grows into a grimace as he begins to pace away in thought. I thought before that night if there was any place which I was safe to discuss, it would be in court, in Elysium. But after what Ambrose showed me, how do I know I am not walking into the second of my assassination attempts?
Surely the other princes would not sit idly by and allow such a thing to happen.
Before that night, I would have seen the same about Ambrose. But now... And he jets vaguely in the air. Ragnar has long sought to expand south. The others, who can say? There are too many unknowns, and not enough certainties. Not enough allies.
Why did you send me with Ragnar?
He smiles faintly. Because I knew I could trust you. And I do not trust her.
I see. Well, I know you're quite prepared, but Do you think things would be favorable if you don't attend? Your side will not be spoken.
You, Robert, will have to present my case on my behalf.
I suspected as much. Very well. I am willing to assist you in any way.
He smiles warmly at that. I knew I could count on you, Robert, if no one else. True that the way in which I have managed the affairs of the merchants of the staple could be seen as unscrupulous, but the resources are vast. The responsibility is heavy. Things devolved so quickly when Gaetan fell. He paces off, looking frustrated, almost exasperated. I knew what it meant for the merchants of the staple, and for me. And I knew that if it was found out in the wrong way, this might happen. Lo and behold, it did. Perhaps I cursed myself.
Not just that. Someone went to efforts to frame you.
What do
Make you the
mean,
perfect. In the document, there was a forgery added to it. One that would make anyone's conclusion instantly go to conclusions that you were not to be trusted.
Then you will have to lean heavily on this. When you present my case, you must make it clear that this is what someone wants. All the same, I cannot simply give up the merchants of the staple to the Covenant. That's an unreasonable request.
What alternative would you provide?
That they trust me. I've been a member of the Covenant for 100 years. I spent half of that time building this guild, this enterprise with Gaetan. In all that time, I could have done anything with these resources. And yet I did not.
Are you just keeping them on hold until a moment when it would benefit the Covenant, then?
He kind of begins to pace away casually. My resources are spread in multiple safe locations, in different forms as well. I'm not worried about those. Now they are in safekeeping for if I need to contact my mercenary friends in Denmark and France. I've already sent messengers to be on alert. I may need their aid sooner rather than later. This garrison, while formidable, will not hold against the Covenant army. Not for long.
Yes, in this time, allies would be vital. I just wish I had more proof. All I have is my own recollection of how Gaetan wrote his documents, and the forgery is quite excellent, and it paints a picture that Gaetan did not trust you.
He nods a couple times, leaning over one of these long tables in his room. Give me one moment, I'm just looking at a note real quick. He turns to you after a few moments in thought. In your investigation, have you ever come across the man named Patrick McNally?
Robert searches his memory. I do not recall that name. Oh, okay. What details were given about him?
From what you heard in the meeting, Patrick McNally was the name given when Cormac and Elenid had a shared vision. It was the name of a merchant that Gaetan thought would be worth investigating into the Mercers.
Yes, I have heard that name mentioned. The other members of the Gauntlet came across that name through means empowered by the blood, I believe.
It is not a detail that I relinquished when I was first questioned. I wished to avoid this entirely. Gaetan and we came across this name, this merchant. I decided not to bring it up because I had hoped that this investigation would never bring in the merchants of the staple or our affairs. I see I was foolish not to. But now that it is out, there is no point. The Mercers, they came across this velvet trader in the port of Hull in Yorkshire. Gaetan was looking into expanding the merchants' enterprises there as well. He found out about this man. He went into some kind of trade with the Mercers. It seems that the Mercer negotiator that came back to meet with Patrick McNally a second time never came out. His guards never came out. Gaetan, he tread carefully when he found out that the Mercers, the negotiators, were going missing. We thought perhaps it was a way we could undermine the Mercers. I suggested that he bring it up to the other Gauntlet. We could make use of the Gauntlet to bring down a threat to all of us. The merchants would benefit. England would benefit. But I suppose he never got around to it. In any case, I continue to keep tabs on Hull through contacts. That merchant, his home and his warehouse went up in flames. within weeks. I assume the Mercers retaliated.
Yes, I believe in the vision he was kidnapped. That makes sense.
There's been no sign of Patrick McNally from what I can tell. I do not know if the Mercers ever got that man back. That all went up in smoke, as they say. And then this tragedy distracted everything. I have not been able to further investigate it. I'd hoped to hide the merchants of the staple entirely. I think perhaps now I have damned myself for that.
Indeed, I think the Mercers are at least funding. I know they're funding instability in the realm, propping up two rival houses. To what end, I don't know. They are very cautious. They constantly purge their documents.
He kind of leans back against the table, looking almost defeated. It's not a demeanor or expression you've seen on him often. I'm backed into a wall and I see no other answer except violence now, Robert. But I will not give up what Gaetan and I created, and I will not die without a fight. He looks to you. His eyes are intense. They glisten with excitement, fear.
I understand. I'll do all that I can on my part. Perhaps diplomacy will win out.
For all our sakes, I hope you're right, Robert. I cannot hold up here forever.
Is there anything else you wish to mention to me?
He pushes off from the table, folding his arms in front of him. I only wish I had this Patrick McNally. I would suffice for his skull, that I could see the man that did this to me. Perhaps answers lie in the ruins. I think it too late now.
More than likely, but it certainly is a start. I'm sure something knows something about what transpired.
Obviously, I told Ragnar none of this. I am sure a couple of fires likely would have gone under her radar. She would never have noted this. But who can say?
I still have time to gather evidence before the trial. I should get moving quickly.
He nods a couple times to looking at the ground.
Have courage. I will do all in my power to assist you.
He looks up and forces a smile. And he walks over and clasps your shoulder. Where my child failed, I am glad that you are here to support me, Robert.
Robert closes his eyes at this, gives a slight smile and a slight bow of the head. Thank you for the kind words.
He nods a couple times and lets go.
And with that, Robert will make a farewell bow and leave the chambers.
And you depart. You make your way out. Sir Reynald escorts you, and where does Robert go next? It's mid-December now.
This town he spoke of was Hall.
The town of Hull is the port that is only 10 miles or so from York. It's basically the main port of Yorkshire.
Okay.
That's the one that you went to with Tom when he was asking about things.
Aha. Okay, makes sense now. Well, he's in Lincoln. He may make a detour before heading to York. In fact, he will. He'll check on his estate real quick, make sure everyone's doing well. His ghoul and his hunter ghoul, and head off to Hull.
All right. Your estate seems to be faring well. Your ghoul, Francois de Masson, is doing everything he can to keep your estate up and running, and it still is a full-time job for him to make sure all of your accounts balance out so that you're not losing money. You are stretched very thin across multiple accounts, but he's keeping it together by keeping all of his attention on it. And your ghoul, Guy, is still present there. He asks if you still wish for him to remain there or to join you.
You can use some company. He'll invite Guy along.
Right. Then he join you. You make a ride going north. The trip from Lincoln to Hull is not very far, fortunately. It is only going to be let's see. about 60, 70 miles. And riding at a good clip, and guy with you, who is also a strong rider, you make it there in 3 nights. You arrive in the port town of Hull, which you are somewhat familiar with through your brief travel here previously.
So, the first stop would be to head to perhaps there's a cathedral or parish. See if he can get in contact with the priest or who would do last rites for anyone who's died, and mention the name Patrick.
Absolutely. I won't make a roll. It's a very simple request. You find some clergy in the town of Hull. It's not quite large enough to have a cathedral at this point, but it does have an abbey. And you talk to some of the clergy there. When you bring up this name, Patrick, or even if Patrick McNally, he goes over his journal and doesn't record any Patrick McNally, any Patricks at all.
I'll ask if he recalls any estates burning in the area years ago.
He explains that earlier this year there were a couple fires. There was a warehouse, and he thinks maybe a home, that both burned down the same night. It was a tragedy, and there were some workers that got caught in the fire that did end up getting last rites posthumously, but there was no Patrick.
Robert will thank the clergyman for his time and... Oh, could he get the location of where this fire took place?
He gives you a rough area. He didn't spend much time over there, but he explains that some of the locals over there might know more about what happened.
And that area is Robert's next destination.
All right. You come to a row of homes that are very modest, very humble, and you find one area that's been cleared. There's a home, or a space for a home, that obviously has been destroyed, or at least taken down. There's no black or charred debris. Of course, it's been too long for that. It's all been cleared away. But upon close examination, you can see that there are still signs of some of the nearby fire damage. It seems like it's the right neighborhood, at least.
What is the closest establishment in this area, like an inn or a place where people would gather?
There's a tavern, probably the equivalent of a block away from here. It's somewhat well traveled.
He'll have Guy look around the ruin, see if he notices anything with his trained eye, and head over to the tavern and have him meet him there.
Okay. As I said, there isn't much of a ruin left. It's all kind of been cleared away. There's just kind of a space of stone where it certainly looks like there's a stone imprint where there was maybe once a hearth, and definitely space enough for a home. Some of the outline where maybe a brick chimney was, but not much of a ruin here anymore.
Okay, so essentially everything has been cleared out.
For the most part, yeah. No one's gotten
Okay.
around to like making a new house there yet or anything.
Well, the first stop is the tavern. Then he'll ask around with the locals, seeing what they know about the fire. Especially hoping like he can find someone who actually witnessed the fire.
Sure, I'll have you do a manipulation investigation. I'll also take charisma investigation.
Wait, was that charisma or manipulation?
You could go either way with this.
I'll go with charisma.
Alright, it's going to be standard difficulty.
Oof.
Fail, so no successes. There's someone who doesn't give you any answers, but for a bribe, he might think extra hard about it.
Robert will attempt to read this man's aura and see if he actually has any, like, if he's actually telling the truth.
Sure. I think that's perception, empathy, difficulty 7. Is that right?
Think so.
Alright. You know he's mortal, and he's vaguely got an interested aura about him. I'm not gonna dig up the color chart. You know, because you've used this enough time, what the aura means. He's definitely curious.
He'll make a counteroffer. He'll get him a drink, and if what he knows is good, maybe some coin can come from it.
Man seems pretty desperate, and he agrees to this. But not before the ale.
And Robert will make sure this man gets an ale.
He's getting something out of this, damn it. So he takes his time sipping his ale, and finally, when he's done chugging away, still foam on his mustache, he makes a big dramatic attempt at trying to remember, and eventually explains to you, yes, he does remember. Actually, there was this pair of brothers, the McNally brothers. One was a velvet merchant, the other was somebody in the church, somehow. He's not sure exactly how. And he recalls that there was a fire. That was his house that burned down. He thinks his brother was in town, but they disappeared just before the fire. That's all he really remembers.
Both of them, you say?
To his knowledge, he saw the brothers one night, and then they were gone, and then the fires happened.
Alright. Well, he'll give the man a coin for his information, and he may need to head back to the clergy.
Okay. He seems grateful to have gotten a coin and an ale for the night for telling something that he's probably told many people in the past for free. So you return to the clergy?
Mm-hmm. This time I'll ask of the McNelly brothers.
The priest explains to you, the same one you talked to, no McNally's died from that fire, but he thinks he remembers someone by that name stopping by the abbey and speaking with some of the priests there briefly, maybe earlier this year.
Did he say he was part of the clergy, or was he a layman?
The priest, this father, seems unsure. The man he's remembering, this McNally, he almost seemed more of like a cutthroat. He wore a cross and he seemed friendly enough with the church, but he had this air of violence about him. He didn't speak much with the man. He didn't pay much attention, obviously.
Did the man have a particular interest in one of the members there that he spoke at length with?
Like one of the other priests or deacons?
Mm-hmm.
He does guide you to one of the other deacons who was much more engaged. Maybe it was a friend or a contact. Deacon Albert.
Great. Is the father staying around for this conversation?
Is Deacon Albert?
No, the priest.
He explains to you that he can point you in the direction of Deacon Albert. He's probably asleep at this hour. Not many.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I thought he actually led me to that man. Yeah, he'll make note of that.
There's cloistered chambers for a lot of the clergy to sleep, and the father you've been speaking to just kind of keeps late hours.
And what is the current time?
We'll say it's around midnight.
Okay, so pretty late, so early in the night may have more luck.
Probably.
Alright, so not getting too bogged down in this, Robert will get a room set up for him and Guy for the night. And on the next night, he'll try again with this deacon.
Easy enough. You return the next night, and you find them in an evening service, and the father, because you are a very smooth talker, and well, you have enough social stats that I'm kind of foregoing a lot of these roles because you destroy them anyway. He kind of definitely is kind of warmed up to you. You seem interested in the goings-on of the local clergy, and he introduces you to Deacon Albert.
All right. He'll ask Deacon Albert if he knows a McNelly.
He tells you he did meet a McNally, Brooks McNally. It was earlier in the year. He came out to meet with his brother, but is something of a contact to the deacon. He recalled that in conversation, Brooks mentioned that Brooks had some kind of standing in Canterbury, and he kind of left abruptly. Maybe back to Canterbury, maybe somewhere else.
Okay. He'll mention he's looking for his brother who he heard disappeared around the same time as the fire for the warehouse. And if he knows anything else, it'd be most helpful.
He nods, seeming to recognize immediately what you're talking about, and recalls the fire, and he was worried because that was right around the time that Brooks left. That he's not sure if they left or if they died, but because the father's there, he explains that there was no recovering of any of the McNally brothers. They were probably fine. That reassures the deacon a bit.
All right, he'll do his best to leave on good terms then. Canterbury, huh?
What will Robert do next?
Well, looking at the distance,
It's far.
yeah, it's really far. So, By now he would suspect everyone would be heading towards Old Serum, so you wouldn't be able to get a message out to anyone. This may have to be on the back burner.
It depends. It's mid to late December. This meeting at Serum is going to be on the night of Candlemas, so February 2nd. Got a little bit of time. You know, much like Cormac and Elena's situation, it's a gamble. And also, it also depends on if you want to return back to London and try to rejoin the Gauntlet first.
Well, what would make most sense with the time frame?
Well, let's see here. You could leave York and be back in London in about a week. And that would put you very close to New Year's. The trip from London to Salisbury, obviously riding, it's gonna be, let's see here, I'm gonna remind myself. It's only about 80 miles. That's west of London. If you go by carriage, that's about 5-6 nights. So roughly a week to be safe. I'll give you some data to work with.
Okay. Because I'm unclear, a week to get to where again?
From London to Salisbury. Also about a week sailing from Hull down to London. So getting over to Hull and then going from Hull to London. So basically to return to London right now would be a week. To go from London to Salisbury would be a week. For you, right now.
Okay. Well, looks like the trip to York will have to wait. Robert will take a ship over to London. And hopefully he can meet up with the others. And if not, with what time he has, he'll try to make it work to get to Canterbury and then down to the meeting.
Okay. So you sail back from Hull to London.
Yes.
That takes you about a week. And you arrive just in time for New Year's. And I want to say that's close to when Cormac, maybe a little bit after Cormac and Eleanor arrive, is that correct?
That sounds about right.
All right.
As we're passing through to our research destination, yes.
You are coming from Cambridge. And I need to remind myself what Bath Tumulus is. It's also known as Stony Littleton Longborough. It's a little bit of a walk. So coming from Cambridge to Stony Littleton Longborough, but you're stopping in London, correct?
Is that to me?
It's Elenid and Cormac. I want to know what their travel plans are in December.
We were headed to Bath Tumulus, as far as I know.
Yes, we were headed to Bath Tumulus.
Alright. The roads will take you through London. Just because that's the nature of the roads. And that will be... let's see. You're riding by carriage, I'm assuming, because you have Gertrude and supplies.
Yeah, that sounds the safest anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. 160 miles. It'll take you about 10 nights. 10 days, 10 nights. And you will reach Stony Littleton Longborough. By that point, it will be the new year. We're going to say early January. And and Tom, I think I paused you right around the end of December as well.
Yep. Because, like I said, all I had to do from that point forward had to happen after the first.
That's right. So let's return to your goings on in London at the turn of the new year, since we're all kind of arriving at that time. The new year comes, and as you were told, the bank has kind of been waiting in the wings, and legally you should be set to transfer it.
So we shall proceed as planned.
Let me just bring up my notes for that as well. Because you had... There he is, Ralph Gunsberg. This was the lawyer that was kind of helping you to facilitate all of this.
That sounds right.
Through your staff, you're able to find Mr. Gunsberg, who joins you again and sits down. He talks with you about the process again. It's been maybe half a year now. And says everything's all set because you prepared this long in advance, and he has the paperwork filed away and processed much more expediently with his familiarity of the process, and especially local courts and magistrates. And he tells you after a couple nights that everything seems to be in order. The bank has been transferred successfully into Judith Chamberlain's name.
Judith Stone.
Judith Stone, thank you. Judith Stone's name.
Well, in that case, it is time for the rebranding to come. It's not the best name in banking in London, but it soon will.
All right. And how do you want to go about starting that rebranding?
So first we're going to change the sign out and rebrand it as... Hold on. We're going to be rebranding it as the Worshipful Hall of Vault Keepers, offering basically the leasing of strong boxes, money changing services, and for a fee, not usury, but for a fee, money lending services.
The sin of usury?
No, a fee, not interest.
Just kidding.
It's a careful distinction, but it's a distinction that's important. Good Christians aren't or forbidden at this time from charging interest.
That's absolutely right. That's old. You're able to do this. So you start establishing this name. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, we'd also be paying off a few bellmen in the nicer parts of London to also carry this announcement.
Let me look at the sheet real quick. So to spread good word of this quote-unquote new bank, I will have you roll a lot of good choices here.
Well, if I may.
What's your idea?
I was thinking wits commerce.
I was thinking about that. We'll go with that. Wits commerce sounds fine.
And we're going to spend a willpower on that.
The difficulty here is going to be 7. Got any specialties?
I wish. I only have... Well, yeah, I don't have enough dots in any of those.
Still 2 successes.
Better than the first time.
It is better. You haven't mismanaged anything, and you have succeeded in starting to drum up some interest, some business interest in this new bank. Some of the gentry and aristocrats that don't quite have the coin of the greater nobility, the counts and the dukes, they see some opportunity in maybe trying to work the system in a new way, and find ways that they can make coin if they don't have the peerage that their superiors do. And so you get some of these greater than peasant class but less than royalty to start to subscribe to you, and you start getting in a few deposits based on the interest you've drummed up. It's slow, but it's a start.
It's better than a negligible success.
Yes.
And about this time, I think I'd also like to set in motion the establishment of a canal boat to and from Edmonton via the River Lee.
You want to establish a vessel, like a river barge? Is that what you're talking about?
Right, yeah. Like a horse-drawn barge to and from Edmonton to improve the rate at which they can move surplus goods to and from that little village for, say, a larger market.
Okay, that's a little bit more of a investment in time and money.
It's long term. I didn't say I was going to... It wasn't going to happen over.
You can start to work on that process. Are you involving the peasants of your town there?
I was going to compensate them for their time over the winter, since they can't really tend fields. Starting the process of restoring that.
Have you roll your resources difficulty 5. Two successes. You succeed in getting some of these men to help you start organizing the area that this barge could be run up and down, and even start to clear up some of the areas where, overgrown foliage, fallen trees might make it more difficult along the river path. And they agree to help you. They're glad to have a little bit of income during the winter, and they normally don't have a lot of that. So you start on that. You start on that process.
Probably premature to also throw resource roll at hiring laborers for the...
Hiring resources for the barge?
Well, for the castle.
Mm. I'm gonna spare you the roll since it is a sizable amount of your income going to this castle, but nothing else of comparable size, except maybe this barge, is really taxing you. This retinue you're growing is going to start taxing you once it gets a bit larger, not much larger, and you are going to have to start to contend with that. But right now, I will say that with most of your expendable resources going towards this castle over the next couple years, you know, it's not all at once, it's not one lump sum, that the peasants are employed, that they are helping you restore this in exchange for coin.
So my question is, how long before it's in a usable state, maybe not fully restored, but how long before it can be occupied by a Cainite safe?
The foreman that you talk to that's kind of in charge of organizing the restoration estimates a couple years before anybody could use it for anything like that.
Okay. So, long term.
Mm-hmm. Definitely long term.
In process. So, yeah, that's probably going to include housing the...
Alright. So you're doing that around the beginning of the new year. Robert is heading down south, and by the new year, did you say you're going straight to Canterbury?
To stop in London, meet with the others, and then Canterbury.
Okay. So that kind of works out. Even though you aren't going to London, Cormac and Elenid, you are passing through it just because the roads take you that way. The ones that do exist right now, at least. And so, by good fortune, you all happen to be in town for a couple nights. Of course, you have to stay over, Cormac and Elenid, just to resupply the horses. Gertrude needs food. And so you stay over a couple of nights. While you are all briefed there. So you are all present for the beginning of the new year when it comes to England in 1455. You're all around for the 12 days of Christmas, seeing that it brings much joy to the peasant class as you pass through to whatever destination you're going. You see the peasant class has the joy of bringing in the Yule log, more food and more clothes from their liege. Despite the frigid temperatures, the kine are blissful, ignorant of the threats surrounding them. But you are not. You are aware of the darker winter, aware of the threat of the war within the Covenant looming overhead. On January 6th, Christian holiday of the Epiphany and 12th day of Christmas, The group of you happen to all be in London when news breaks. News breaks of an attack. There was a skirmish in Lincolnshire, a battle of some magnitude. The Lincoln Prince John Mark is believed to be dead, destroyed in the battle. This news breaks on the city like a wave. And an emergency court has been called in London on midnight tonight, on the night of the Epiphany. And on that note, we will close this session.
Son of a bitch.
We will pick it up next week.
Goddamn cliffhangers.
Good game.
Yeah, good game.
I think it's probably lucky that several hundred miles separate you and Scott right now.
Too bad we couldn't get to the tomb and unleash all the horrors.
In before it's Mithras.
It's not Mithras.
There is no Mithras.
You keep saying that. I feel like that's ready.
No, I hate Mithras. No, I have something much more interesting. But I enjoyed that. That panned out in ways that I didn't expect at all. I got you all back in London right when I needed you to.
How convenient.
Meanwhile, they're stuck in London, but research too.
Oh,
Guess
by the
that-
way, Schoenberg's dead. Oh, wait. No, maybe we should stay.
Guess that Covenant meeting is going to have a very different flavor.
Certainly will.
Boy, oh boy, I can't wait.
Let's do some entertaining role players. Start with Robert.
Give it to Cormac. I like how he seemed more scholarly this game, and even got a scholar ghoul.
Absolutely. Scholar Cormac.
I'm gonna have to give it to Robert. Definitely. We're spilling all the beans again.
Only a quarter of the beans.
I actually kind of anticipated that.
An important quarter.
The one thing he did share with Jean-Marc was the one thing I wanted him to share.
The one thing you expressly told him to.
Tasty.
Tom.
I want to give it to Cormac also. I very much enjoyed how he dealt with the ghoul situation.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was a fun scene to work out. Side quest. Get him a ghoul. I like that. Elenid.
I'm going to give it to Robert. For reasons of having more control over what he's spilling to his grandson.
Perfect. All right. 3 experience all around. Great game. Very much looking forward to next week.